Namaste, everyone. Good morning, good evening, depending on wherever you are in this world. Hope you are all staying safe. There is a bit of surprise in today's topic because the original topic I was planning to present, the puzzle of the Jesus family tomb, that is mostly statistics. So I did not want to keep it very technical, and I have to translate that into simple English so that everyone can easily comprehend and follow. Unfortunately, I couldn't find the time to sit down and create it due to some personal commitments. So there is a change of topic. From statistics, we are moving over to adulteress in this meeting, but we'll come back to the Jesus family tomb probably next week or the week after that. So the topic for today is Jesus and the adulteress. And a couple of quick housekeeping rules. We have disabled the group chat for everyone. That's mainly because I'm presenting from my iPhone and it's really difficult when everyone is greeting each other and it's a small screen. So that's the reason we have disabled. But as we get closer to Q&A session, we'll open up the group chat, and at the time I'll request Rajiv to call out the individual persons, participants, so that he can ask the questions and we'll be answering them. Without much ado, today's topic, Jesus and the adulteress. So here is the story we have been told, right? This story is very popular in the media. This story has been popular in most of the Sunday schools and other things of Christian churches, but also even non-Christians have heard the story in various forms, mainly because of the colonial rule. And here is what the story runs like. So this is told in the Bible. I have given the verse numbers. So a woman is accused of committing adultery. And then she is dragged by a Jewish mob. So 2000 years ago, when Jesus allegedly existed, we don't have to go into the historicity of Jesus here, but when he allegedly existed, he was born into a Jewish family, and original Christianity was a Jewish sect. So this woman is being dragged by a mob, and the mob accuses her of committing adultery. Okay? So the mob accuses of committing adultery, and then the punishment for adultery, according to the Bible, is stoning to death. So they bring the woman over, and then they find Jesus sitting there with his disciples. Okay, he has 12 of them. They are all sitting there, and then they reach out to Jesus and they ask him, "What do you want us to do with this woman? Should we forgive her? Should we kill her?" So Jesus is in a quandary. He doesn't respond. He keeps quiet for a while, and then the mob presses on. They ask the same question time and again, and finally, Jesus gives a response. He says, "He who is sinless cast the first stone at the woman." Meaning, whichever among you is sinless in the entire mob, please throw the first stone. So the story then goes on this way. The mobsters fall silent, and then they realize none of them is sinless. And then they all disperse. And then Jesus tells the woman, do not commit any more sins and, lead a sinless life. Okay, so effectively he admonishes the woman. So this has been discussed time and again by Christian propagandists. And the latest to do that was Pope Francis. So Francis brings up a very strange set of arguments. Okay, number one, he wants to prove that Jesus is a very, very, very merciful person. So the first argument he makes is the woman did not deny the charge leveled against her. So that means she was guilty. This is a very strange accusation because a woman who is accused of adultery, whether she really committed it or not, would be in a state of shock because she's being dragged by a mob to be stoned to death. Okay, so even if she were completely innocent, she would still be not in a position to protest and then establish her innocence. So most of the time she would have just withdrawn into a shell and remained quiet. And Pope Francis takes this silence for admission of guilt. And then Francis argues that she was guilty. However, Jesus was merciful that he forgave her. But the problem is, the argument that Pope Francis makes about this woman, her silence is an admission of guilt, can be equally applied to Jesus too. Because in the Gospel of John, chapter 18, Jesus is being taken to Pontius Pilate. So Pilate is the local administrator or the equivalent of governor of Judea. and the Jewish crowd grabs Jesus. They march him to Pilate. They accuse him of some charge. He has some crime he has committed. The Bible doesn't tell what is the nature of that crime. And then they ask Pontius Pilate to adjudicate. So Pilate wants to know. Okay, so Pilate wants to know what is the crime this man has committed. But Jesus does not protest. He does not establish his innocence. He remains silent too. Okay? And then, in fact, all he says is, when Pilate asks him, are you guilty? All he says is, you have heard the mob. Okay. So by the same yardstick, using the same yardstick that Francis uses for this woman, now, since Jesus remained silent, we should also consider him guilty. His silence must be taken as the admission of guilt. But we won't do that because, we will apply better logic and better yardstick than Francis does. But regardless, in the case of Francis, he makes these arguments only to drive home the point that Jesus is very merciful. So the main outcome of the story, which has been told and retold by Christians, is that there was an adulteress. She was about to be stoned to death. But then Jesus gave a really clever response. He said, whichever one among you is sinless, cast the first stone. And then the audience, the mob fell silent. They all realized every one of them is a sinner. And then they all dispersed and the woman was saved. So Jesus was clever. And then Jesus was able to give a great repartee and then silence the mob. And he was able to save the woman. And he even forgave the woman. That means Jesus is also very merciful. This is the story we have been told. Is this story, is the interpretation or is the message Christians want us to take out of this reasonable? That's what we'll find out in this discussion. So here is the first question to ask. What if one of the mobsters had thought he was sinless? And what if he had cast the first stone? And this is not just a rhetorical question, because what kind of persons will join a mob and they will march a woman only to lynch her and then to stone her to death? What kind of people will do that? The ones who will do that are the people without the slightest empathy. Okay, because just to accuse a woman of adultery and then to stone her to death, you must be quite a ruthless person. You must not have any empathy. So the ordinary people who have some empathy in their hearts, they won't be joining this mob. So these are the people who are going to join the mob, and then these are going to be, some of them would be psychopaths, some of them would be sociopaths. These are the people who derive a lot of pleasure out of the suffering of others. But more importantly, the ones who would have been part of the mob would also be religious fanatics, and whose notion of morality is entirely derived from religious injunctions. I'm not using the word teaching, because teaching also implies that you could still reason and understand, but an injunction, a commandment, a biblical commandment, that's all they follow. So these people are religious fanatics, and hence to them, whatever the Bible says is morally correct and defensible, and whatever the Bible rejects is morally indefensible. Since the Bible, we saw the verse in the previous slide, since the Bible says the one who commits adultery must be stoned to death, these religious fanatics would have thought that they were doing something morally defensible when they joined the mob, dragged the woman, lynched her, and attempted to stone her to death for the charge of committing adultery. And these people are unlikely to introspect and then come to the conclusion, look, we are not sinners, we are not sinless, and he should not be judging another woman too. So what kind of mentality is that which entrusts self-introspection and the ability to self-adjudicate on mobsters, sociopaths, psychopaths, and people who are religious fanatics? And that's what Jesus did here. And what if one of the mobsters had challenged Jesus? Because Jesus was trying a clever rhetoric, but the mob could have also returned, at least one of them could have returned the same answer with a clever repartee to Jesus. What if somebody had asked, Jesus, aren't you sinless? Why don't you cast the first stone? What would Jesus have done? In that case, he would have been in a quandary, because if he does not cast the first stone, then he is violating the injunction of the Bible. Time and again, Jesus tells everywhere in the Bible, especially Matthew 5:17, that he has not come to abrogate or abolish any of the biblical laws and commandments. Instead, he has come to fulfill every one of the commandment unto the last word. In other words, if the Bible says an adulteress should be stoned to death, then Jesus says, I am here to fulfill that. So which means he cannot walk away and he cannot say, now I cannot throw the first stone, or this woman should not be stoned to death. If he did that, he is going against the biblical commandment. So at the end of the day, what comes across as a very clever rhetoric from Jesus is actually something very immoral, because it interested self-introspection in the hands of mobsters, psychopaths, sociopaths, and religious fanatics. And number two, it's actually quite dumb, because one of the mobsters could have just asked Jesus, aren't you sinless? Why don't you throw the first stone? Okay. And then what happens is, in this story, Jesus keeps doodling on the ground. Okay, when everyone is asking Jesus, what should we do with this woman? Should we stone her to death or should we let her go? It's a loaded question, right? Because when Jesus says, if Jesus were to say, no, forgive her, let her go, then they will immediately challenge him. How can you go against the laws of the Bible? On the other hand, if he were to throw the stone and kill her, then at least today's Christians, had he done that, in those days, nobody would have thought it was wrong. At least none of the religious fanatics in that setting would have thought it was wrong. But today, Christians wouldn't be able to use the story for propaganda. So, in any case, Jesus is just doodling on the ground. He doesn't reply. And then the mob keeps pressing him time and again. And then he finally comes up with this clever response. So there are a few thoughts that come to your mind. Okay, so Jesus is not alone. He is sitting there with 12 of his disciples. Okay, granted, the mob is much larger. But if we are to take an analogy, let's say we are with a group of friends, 10 or 12 of them, and we are in a park, and then a small gang or a large gang, they try to disrobe or rape a woman, what would we do? We will try to defend that woman. We will at least take some initiative. Okay, so even if we are outnumbered, we won't be pretending and showing complete apathy as if there's nothing happening and mind our own business. We won't do that. Instead, we will try to intervene. We will try to rescue the woman as much as we can. But Jesus did not. Instead, he was ignoring and acting with complete apathy until the mob kept on repeating the same question to him a few times. That's number one. And number two, even when the mob finally cornered him and forced him to give an answer one way or the other, Jesus did not repudiate the barbaric laws of the Bible. He could have said, any moralistic person would have said, look, you do not know this woman committed adultery. Okay, there is no proof. But even if she had committed, it is not something for which you will stone a woman to death. Okay, we do not know what were the circumstances that led her to commit adultery. It's between her and her husband. Okay, let them sort it out, and it's none of your business. Okay, stay out. That's what a reasonable person would have said. A reasonable person would have said, look, the Bible, the biblical laws that advocate stoning to death of an adulteress are barbaric, and we are not going to do that. Okay? He did not do that. Instead, he was a slave of the most barbaric laws. In other words, in today's world, if you look at the ISIS or the Taliban or Al-Qaeda and all of these people, that's what they do. They will quote the Quran, they will quote the Hadith, and then they will chop off the hands of an innocent person, or they will abduct a Yazidi woman and turn her into a sex slave, because that's what the Quran teaches. That's what the Hadith teaches. And then we don't hesitate to call these ISIS fanatics or the Al-Qaeda or Taliban fanatics as fanatics. The reason is that's what they are. And we don't let any other propaganda come in the way of judging them. We judge them by their actions and their deeds. That's exactly what Jesus did. Here are the barbaric laws of the Bible, and then Jesus is not repudiating them, and he is only trying a clever repartee to get around them. Yet we are not calling him a fanatic. And the last one is, Jesus proclaimed the woman a sinner, and he told the woman, sin no more, go away and sin no more. And how did he know that the woman was a sinner in the first place? Even if she had committed adultery, it may not be a sin. Okay, there could have been some other circumstantial factors that made her commit adultery. But even if she had committed adultery, it may not have been a sin. But two, there is absolutely no evidence, and Jesus had no way of knowing that she was an adulteress. Yet she took the words of the mob that she was an adulteress and then told her not to sin anymore. So in other words, she could have very well been an innocent person who was falsely accused by the mob, and Jesus showed no further capability than to listen to the mob and just nod his head. That's all he did. So, what is the conclusion we should arrive at? Okay. The first conclusion is, Jesus was a misogynist. Okay, and then Jesus cared nothing about a defenseless woman. In this case, the woman accused of adultery, being dragged by the mob, and who was being lynched and who was about to be stoned to death. He did not take her sides, and then he did not show any empathy towards her. Instead, he just showed complete apathy from the beginning to the end. But most importantly, this is a pattern you will see throughout in the behavior of Jesus. So one of them is, there is a biblical verse, there's a New Testament verse, Luke 16:18, where he says, whoever marries a divorced woman commits adultery. Okay. So divorce in the Bible, in the Old Testament, and in those parts of Judea was a very complicated thing. A man could divorce a woman, but the other way around was not allowed. It's the same thing we find in Islam too. In Islam too, a woman cannot utter triple talaq and get rid of her husband, but only a husband can divorce his wife. So all of these things come from the Old Testament, from the Bible. Okay, so the biblical laws allowed a man to divorce his wife, but the woman was not allowed to divorce her husband. So when a husband divorced his wife, he had to issue what was called get. It's called the bill of divorce. Okay, and only when the woman was issued a bill of divorce, she could go and remarry. Until that time, she was known as an aguna, or a chained wife. Okay, meaning she had been set aside by the husband. Okay, her husband has effectively divorced her, but she cannot go and remarry somebody, and she has to be waiting for her husband to show some ex-husband to show some pity and give her a bill of divorce. In other words, a vengeful husband could just withhold this bill of divorce from her for a really long time and harass and persecute her. So a divorced woman was really a very hapless, very defenseless person in the world of the Bible. Yet, Jesus showed no sympathy towards such woman. Instead, he said, a person who marries a divorced woman is committing adultery. Okay. So, all of this means Jesus was a misogynist. Jesus lacked the empathy. Jesus showed complete apathy towards the suffering of innocent people. And then he took no initiative whatsoever to come to the defense of the adulteress or the woman who was accused of adultery. And then he simply trusted the words of the mob and pronounced the woman guilty. And he did not repudiate any of the biblical laws, which are barbaric and which advocated the stoning of the woman to death. And instead, in the Bible, everywhere he says, I'm here to fulfill every one of those laws unto the last word. And which makes Jesus a person without a moral compass. So this story, which is used by Christian propagandists like Pope Francis to portray Jesus as someone who's merciful, who's giving clever women to come to the defense of defenseless people, actually is, when we scrutinize the story, it portrays Jesus as a person lacking in moral values, lacking a complete moral compass. Very simply, most of the time, thanks to colonial rule and thanks to all the propaganda we have been fed over the last 2 centuries, we tend to judge the words and deeds of Jesus by his reputation. Whereas we have to do exactly the opposite. We should judge the reputation of Jesus by his words and deeds. So when we do the latter, that's what Christopher Hitchens advocated. I'm just paraphrasing his words here. So when we do that, when we judge the reputation of Jesus by his words and deeds, he comes across as a person without a moral compass. With that, I'll open up for question and answer. Rajiv, back to you.
Yes, please go ahead and ask your questions. I'll open up the chat as well.
Namaskar, this is Bhakti Joshi. Was this story before the reformation of Christianity, or after that?
Sorry, can you come again with your question?
So there is a Reformation era in Christianity, actually.
Okay,
So
thank you. Okay, got it. Got it. Okay, understood the question. Let me repeat the question. Where does this story come from? Does it come from a period after the Reformation of Christianity or before? Okay, this story comes from the Bible. That's number one. Okay, this comes from the New Testament. Of course, New Testament itself was written over many centuries, and in the one of the previous classes, I have quoted Professor Bart Ehrman, and Bart Ehrman points out there are more than 200,000 manuscript variations of the New Testament, which is more than the number of words in the English translation of King James Version of the Bible. So, the New Testament itself, or the Christian Bible, was written over many centuries, and the earliest redacted version goes back to the 4th century. So, none of that is a real contemporary, testimony or chronicle of the life of Jesus. That's number one. But having said that, this story comes from the New Testament itself, which means it was written down sometime before the 4th century CE. Okay, this is number one. Then number two, coming to the Reformation, the Reformation does not mean much. Okay, so most of the people think of Reformation in very positive terms. Okay, so when you look at someone like Martin Luther, the word used is he was a Christian reformer. And then since people don't question these words, we start thinking of them in very positive terms. It's not. Okay. In Reformation, it means to reform everything. Okay. To going back to the fundamentals. Okay. So Martin Luther stuck 95 theses or pamphlets on the doors of the churches, and he started a movement. And what was his complaint? His complaint was, we have started interpreting Christianity not according to the word of the Bible, and then we have done it according to all the accretions that happened later on. So he was taking everyone back to fundamentalism, to the literal words of the Bible, and hence that's what Reformation is all about. It's not a positive thing. So if you were to reform Christianity completely, then if a woman committed adultery, you should stone her to death. Then the Bible also teaches on your wedding night, if you suspect that your bride is not a virgin, then you should drag her to her father's doorstep, and then you should invite the mob, the entire village, and everyone should stone her to death. So these are the teachings that come from the Bible. And if you were to truly reform Christianity, it will become very barbaric. Just like when Islam is reformed, you get the ISIS, or you get the Al-Qaeda or Taliban. The same way, when you reform Christianity, that is, when you go back to the fundamentals, you will get a very, very barbaric religion. Okay, so Reformation is not something positive, even though it has been portrayed that way by the propagandists, by the colonial rulers over the last 2 or 3 centuries. That's number one. Then, going back, the story itself is to be found in the New Testament, although it was not a very popular story for many centuries. Okay, there are 2 reasons for that. Number one, in its earliest settings, Christianity was a Jewish religion. It was born within Judaism. It was a subsect of Judaism, and hence there was no incentive for anyone to claim that Jesus taught something that could be interpreted as not following the laws of the Bible. Okay, and hence none of them would have even spoken about these things in the first place. This story itself, in my opinion, would have come into existence only in the 4th century, after Christianity had spread to the pagans in the Roman Empire. And then when they came up with the story, the main idea of the story was to not directly reject Judaism and the biblical laws, but to indirectly do that. Okay, because by this time in the 4th century, Christianity had become a pagan religion, and we find no trace of Christianity among the Jews of Judea or Palestine or Israel. Okay, so that's when the story comes into existence. But still, throughout the medieval age, nobody thought, unfortunately, nobody thought that it was terrible to treat women this way. Okay, so nobody would have really cared about this. So this story itself became popular only in the last couple of centuries. Same with the Sermon on the Mount. All of these teachings became popular only after Tolstoy and others started writing about these stories from the 18th, 19th century onwards. Okay, so that's because in the modern world, we started looking at women very differently. Although I think Hinduism has done that even in the ancient period, but we have done these things, and based on that, these stories became popular. But otherwise, the story itself is to be found in the New Testament itself. Next question.
Yeah, next
Thank
is
you.
Santosh.
Hi, I'm Santosh from Bangalore, India. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
This is the first time that I've actually joined the call, so it's quite motivating for me, as well as I'm feeling very enthusiastic because most of the people I see that you guys are from US, and I worked in IT field. I've been born and brought up in Bangalore. And the area where I stay in Bangalore is called as Kalyan Nagar. It's near Kamnalli, Banaswadi, somewhere there. People from Bangalore will realize. We have seen such a big surge in the number of churches that have cropped up in our area. In the last 15 years, there are more than 30,000 churches. Even every house is a church, right? So I need 10 main points. When these guys are saying Hindus have casteism, Hindus follow superstitious belief, I need top 10 points where I can prove their Bible is wrong. Can you
Thank you
please?
very much. Yeah, thank you. Couple of very quick requests. Keep the questions. Couple of quick, reminders to everyone. Please keep the question brief. And two, I will respond to this question, but then let's confine the questions to today's topic. Okay, that way it's easy to share details and remain focused. But I'll answer this question. But going forward, please keep your questions brief and confined to today's topic. Okay. Yes. So the point is that there is a mushrooming of churches. Okay, and then the way Christianity spreads is by paying money. Okay, very simply put. Okay, there's no other way it spreads. It's either through money or through the fraud of faith healing. Okay, those are the two means by which Christianity spreads. And the most important thing is Hindus should realize, that's the argument I make in my book and in many of my writings. Every Hindu should realize that Hinduism and Christianity cannot coexist. Okay, it's like a rapist and a victim coexisting. That's impossible. It's a conundrum. So there are going to be only one of the two outcomes. Outcome number A, Christianity will prevail and it will eventually eradicate Hinduism completely. There won't be any Hinduism left. That's what has started to happen in places like South Korea, where in a matter of 2 to 3 decades, Christianity became the dominant religion. Okay, from zero, it became dominant. Or you take the northeastern states, where in 1971, for example, Nagaland, there was hardly any Christianity. It was still in single digits, but today it is 97 or 98% Christianity. So it's 97 or 98% Christian. Please mute yourself. Everyone, please mute yourself. Yeah. And then, Rajiv, can you mute everyone?
Yeah, I muted him. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you. And then, so the first thing Hindus should realize is Christianity and Hinduism cannot coexist. And if you care about Hinduism, you should be willing to accept that the only possible outcome is to eradicate Christianity and save every single Christians from the clutches of Jesus. Okay, we should be the saviors. We should be saving Christians from Jesus. And you cannot do that by reasoning out with the Christians, because Christianity is a mimetic virus. It takes possession of your mind, it warps your worldview, and hence Christians won't be open to reason. I talked about that in one of the previous classes, where I brought up the neuroscience fact that once you are 7 or 8 years old, it's very hard to persuade you, especially when it comes to religion, whereas you are brainwashed in religion even before that. So the most important thing that every Hindu should do is to realize that Christianity should be eradicated. If you agree with that, then the second thing is you should go not after the peripheral things, such as the behavior of Jesus. This is something, Sitaram Goel and Kohindra Adels have time and again brought up, and I discussed both of their writings at length in my book and many other essays. And both of them have mentioned the tendency among Hindus to only criticize the missionaries. Okay, they will say, missionaries are behaving this way, which is unpalatable to us and which we don't like, which is very offensive to us. But The same Hindus will go and praise Jesus. Okay. In fact, some of them will act clever by half and they will say, is this what Jesus taught you? That's what they will go and ask the missionaries. And the missionaries will say, yes, this is what he taught us. He said, go and convert everyone. Nobody goes to heaven except through me. These are things that Jesus taught. So we should realize that missionaries don't matter. Okay. Missionaries are exactly doing what Jesus taught them and what he mandated them to do. That's what they are doing. So we should go after Jesus. So if we really care to eradicate Christianity, then the only strategy that will work is a relentless ridicule of Jesus and a relentless criticism of the Bible. Okay, so 10 points, very easy to provide. I have provided a lot of those in my writings, and I'm more than happy to simplify those. And then some of that has started to happen in the state of Tamil Nadu and a few other places, where when the Christians go to convert, the local villagers challenge them with 1 or 2 questions and then chase them away from there. Okay, it has begun to happen, and there are groups which are working on that. And in Karnataka, if you want to do something similar, I'm very, very happy to coach. Okay, so the bottom line is, when a missionary or when even a Christian comes, you should go and challenge them, or we should even take the initiative of going to the church and ridiculing Jesus and to ridicule the Bible. If we do that, still the existing Christians won't convert, but the next generation of Christians will become curious, especially in this world of age of internet, and then they will go and start looking up, and then they will be alienated from their parents' religion, and that's what we should try. Next question.
Yes, Saket. Saket?
Yes. I just wanted to know, in short, because today is the first day I have attended, the purpose and the aim of this program. That's all. Thank you.
Yeah. So let's stick to the questions related to the topic, and maybe Rajiv can towards the end talk about the purpose of this call. So
Sure.
Next question, please.
Yeah. Jaspal Dhaliwalji.
Yeah, thanks. Actually, I have a very simple question. It may not be very much related to today's topic. Please forgive me. I actually have started basically from last some time, kind of like reading few of the main religions books, including Christianity. I just needed to be basically routed to kind of like the right source. Actually, I have a Holy Bible right now with me, but I don't know whether that's the right source. So I just need to know that actually, because one of the attendees asked a question, give me 10 questions or something. So I think we can get it by reading into books, but what books to read, which is the right source. So I need that information. Maybe offline also I can contact. Rajiv ji.
Next question onwards, we'll stick to today's topic.
Sure.
So the point is, there are 2 things to look at, right? Number 1 is the Bible itself. Okay, so which Bible is authentic? Practically all of them are the same. Okay, so there are differences. Okay, there are very subtle differences. Some of the books, right, of the 27 books, some of them are emphasized more or less by a given Christian sect, but you can just go online and you can search for the Bible and you will find it. Okay, so I think which Bible itself is a less important question than how to read the Bible. Okay, the key is to read it critically. Okay, so as I kind of mentioned in that blue font right at the end, don't judge the Bible or Jesus by the contents of the Bible or the words and deeds of Jesus by his reputation. Instead, judge his reputation by his words and deeds. So the most important thing is to critically read it, and some of them have attempted. So Thomas Jefferson, one of the founding fathers of America, realized that a lot of things in the Bible were terrible, right? They were immoral and all these things, and then he tried to get rid of all of those verses he thought were immoral, and then he came up with what is called the Jefferson Bible, and that's only 19 pages long, 19, less than 20 pages. And then there was another American thinker called Ambrose Bierce, and Ambrose Bierce was even more selective and even more critical. And then he said, the only problem with the Holy Book, the Bible, is that its covers are too far apart. In other words, he said there is nothing good between the covers of the Bible. Okay, and when you look at my book, that's exactly what I do. I start with evaluating the 2 positions. Is Thomas Jefferson right, or is Ambrose Bierce right? And then I examine the various teachings of the Bible, the conduct of Jesus, everyone, and I come to the conclusion that Ambrose Bierce is right. He was right. And then there is nothing good in the Bible. So the most important thing is to examine the Bible critically, examine the words and deeds of Jesus critically, and to follow it. For example, the Sermon on the Mount. Okay, a lot of Hindus, especially the westernized, English-educated Hindus who do not critically examine anything coming from the West. Okay, they are what you can call the Gangadins. Okay, and then, or these are the ones, you know, who are the Dhimmis. And these people would be praising Sermon on the Mount, left, right, and center. But all you have to do is to read the Sermon on the Mount itself, where Jesus is calling non-believers dogs and swine. Okay, so it's not just non-believers, it's also the people in the worldview of Jesus. It's also the people who were, he called him the Goyim. So those were the non-Jewish people. So he was being a racist too. So he was an out-and-out racist who thought that non-believers and people of every race except his own were dogs and swine. That's what the Sermon on the Mount says. Yet most of the Hindus who would be praising it and who would be translating that and who will be waxing eloquent about Sermon on the Mount wouldn't look at these words staring at them in their face. So the important thing to do is to read it critically. Next question.
Yeah, Gaurav is next. Gaurav?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Okay. Hi, thanks for this opportunity to ask this question and the wonderful information which you have been sharing. Thank you for that. My question is that, so in these days, we are talking a lot about Islamic, culture and the suppression they do and the Sharia law and what kind of hardliners they are. But I do believe that the Christianity is just the other side of the same coin. They are all together in this. So why this, this information, right, that they are similar to them is not available in the public domain? Why they are like soft boys, kind of shown like very nice guys, and everybody in the movies or anywhere you see the propaganda is so that people get attracted to them.
Mm-hmm.
And why
Right.
we are getting away? Yeah, why
Right.
they can get away like this?
Right. So that's a very good question, right? So the reason for that is, at the end of the day, sound bites and propaganda sell. Okay. So Muslims have been generally a little bit shameless. Okay. They look at the Quran, they look at the Hadith, and then they say, we are not going to be apologetic and we are not going to spin it around. They will commit taqiyya. Okay. On some occasions, they will commit taqiyya. But apart from that, they are generally shameless about that. And then they are not trying to reinvent Muhammad to fit the modern conceptions. However, Christians, mainly because Christianity was also a tool and vehicle of colonial expansion. And Christianity invested heavily in propaganda, communication, etc., to make itself more adaptable. They did it particularly over the last 2 or 3 centuries, particularly last 150, 200 years. And hence, they came up with phrases like, Christianity is the religion of peace. It's the religion of love. Okay. And then even though it teaches unmitigated hatred towards non-believers, it's ultimately the religion of hate, and even more hateful than Islam is. So for example, the book of Revelation teaches that Jesus would return and he would commit a terrible genocide of non-believers. First, he will torture non-believers for 5 months on earth. Okay. After 5 months of torture, he will slaughter every non-believer. And that death toll, if one were to believe the New Testament, would run into millions and millions of people. Okay, sometimes even into billions. Okay, so, and then much of the world's population would be eradicated. So Christianity is as much a religion of hate as Islam is. And more importantly, everything you find in Islam did not originate in a void. It came from either Christianity or it came from Judaism. In other words, it came from the Bible. In fact, there are some recent studies over the last 10 or 15 years by Christoph Luxemburg and others that have shown, or that have very effectively argued that Islam was more of an offshoot of one of the variants of Christianity that was being practiced. Okay, so anyway, I'm not going to get into those discussions now. We can make it a separate topic. But long story short, everything you find barbaric in Islam actually comes from the Bible. Okay, and then Islam only builds on top of that and makes it even more explicit. To give a simple example, the word haram, right? What is halal and what is haram? And linguistically speaking, the word haram has a cognate in the Bible. It's called haram, okay, and means it's something forbidden. So the Bible teaches what is forbidden. Okay, in other words, this world is completely forbidden to non-believers. This world is completely forbidden to people who are non-Jewish. Okay, that's why there is the story of Joshua and others in the Bible where they are encouraged to not only go and attack the others who are not Jews, the non-Jewish people, but to kill every man, woman, and child, and even the cattle. Okay, they have to be all killed and then take possession of their land. Okay, so this kind of Lebensraum-seeking behavior, this kind of hate mongering, is intrinsic to the Bible, and then anti-Semitism is pretty much the core feature of the Bible. And in fact, Stanley Vernon and others have effectively argued that if you remove the anti-Semitic verses in the Bible, there is no Christianity left. Okay, so Christianity is as much the religion of hatred, but they were able to get away with that for the same reasons that Muslims today are able to get away with the slogan, Islam is the religion of peace. Most people don't believe it, but give it enough time, people will start believing in it. How? Because anyone who speaks the truth about Islam is called Islamophobic, okay, and bigoted and all these things, or even racist. Even though Islam is not a race, that's what you'll be called. You'll be called a racist, you'll be called bigoted, and then you'll be called Islamophobic. So the only thing in public domain you can see, whether you're in a university, whether you're in a corporation, or even in mainstream or social media, is to say that Islam is a religion of peace, and the behavior of the Taliban, ISIS, and Al-Qaeda is an aberration, and they are not following Islam. That's the lie you have to tell if you want to be accepted. Okay? And so if this continues for a few more years, then the next generation will grow up not knowing the truth about Islam, and they will also start believing that Islam is the religion of peace. Okay, and you have complete charlatans and propagandists like Karen Armstrong, who have been peddling these kind of narratives, fake narratives about Islam. Okay, their entire job is to give a positive spin to Islam and then to propagate that. So Christians have been doing exactly the same thing for the last 150 years or so. And then in most of the countries, they have blasphemy laws. And this is true even in Europe. Many of the European countries have that. And then India definitely has that. And if you say negative things about Jesus or the Bible, you can be harassed, you can be arrested, and all these things. Okay. So most of people, they keep quiet and then give it. And since this has gone on for a long time, now people have started believing that Christianity is a religion of peace. Now, the important thing to do is not to accept this, right? And to start with, in fact, this is something I mentioned in one of previous calls too, is to remove the most fundamental impediment. Okay, we have had the Modi government ruling in the first term, now it's the second term. Still, we have not done anything to get rid of these laws that will put you in trouble if you attack Christianity or Islam. Okay. So whereas Hinduism can be criticized, anyone can go and mock Hinduism, nothing will happen. But you say anything negative about Christianity, you will be harassed. So get rid of those laws which are created by our colonial rulers to protect Christianity, and then open up the doors for making fun of Christianity, because freedom of speech and most importantly, the freedom to ridicule is the only way you can get rid of this kind of false propaganda. Next question.
Yeah, Aditya ji.
Yes, I'm reframing a question I had asked in a previous session. See, primarily, Jesus never existed. He was not a historic person. But the character of Jesus is what we derive information about from the Bible, which was the New Testament part composed after his supposed timeline of birth by people who were later. So wouldn't his character as is presented actually be a projection of the depraved minds of the composers of the New Testament, Jewish, be they Romans, be they Peter, Paul, anyone? And how do we deal with this? Because we do not want these two arguments of historicity and the other one about depraved and psychotic behavior to counter each other. Please explain this a little bit.
Sure, thank you.
Thanks.
So the way I will put this is right, and even I think Jesus probably did not exist, right? But then the best way to frame that answer is we have no evidence, no historical evidence for the existence of Jesus. Okay, but is it possible that Jesus of the New Testament is a composite character? I think that's entirely possible. What does it mean? It means there was someone, some kind of a religious teacher who existed, and his name was probably Jesus, right? And then, what he taught and what kind of person he was, we know nothing about, right? And then a lot of myths have accrued on top of him, and then have been attributed to him. And then today we have the Jesus of the New Testament. And you're absolutely right. The New Testament was written over many centuries. Okay, it was written for a particular purpose, right? The purpose was to establish a line of religious thinking, okay, a theological position. And to do that, verses were created in and attributed to Jesus and made part of the New Testament. Now, how do we respond to this? There are two ways we should. Okay, number one, we can definitely say, look, there was no historical Jesus, and hence you're following a fake religion. Sure, that will work with some people, right, who care about the historicity of Jesus. Okay, and definitely it'll help a lot of Hindus to go and argue with the Christians when they come. Look, we don't even have any evidence that Jesus existed, and take your religion and go away, right? And we should definitely do that. However, that won't work with everyone, okay? Because a lot of Christians will say, I have experienced Jesus in my heart, okay? And then, or they will come back and give a clever response. How can you prove that Jesus did not exist? He lived 2000 years ago. How do you know he did not exist? Okay. So in other words, their argument is we trust the words of the New Testament, the claims of the New Testament, more than we trust your criticism, we trust your evidence, we trust your arguments from reason. Okay, that will be their stance. So that's why we have to take a multi-dimensional attack. Okay, so depending on the audience we are dealing with, one is to educate the Hindus. To educate the Hindus, we should give all of this information. Christianity, Jesus probably did not exist, and two, the New Testament is a completely unreliable text because it was written and edited over and over again. And three, we have to teach them that the teachings of the Bible, including the teachings of Jesus, are actually hateful teachings, and we should not be bestowing any dignity upon them. That's something we should teach the Hindus. Then to the Christians, ridicule. Ridicule is the most powerful weapon. Okay, so look at what they do to Hindus. Okay, they will take something like caste system. Okay, Jati and Varna are nothing like what Christians or the colonial administrators have brainwashed Hindus into believing them. But let's not go into the discussion. Effectively, they have made caste something evil. Okay, that's how they have portrayed it. And as a result, today, most of the English-educated Hindus, even though personally they find nothing wrong with caste, okay, personally they may end up marrying within their own jati, their own varna, and they may follow all of their traditions. But still, the moment a Westerner asks, what do you think about caste system? Their immediate answer is, oh, you know what, it's going away, and we are reforming it, and all these answers they will give. Okay, that's because Christians from the colonial period have attacked and ridiculed caste system. So you want to distance yourself from it, even though a vast majority of Hindus follow their own caste traditions. Okay, the same thing will happen to Christians too. When you start attacking Jesus relentlessly and ridicule him relentlessly, and then you start mocking the New Testament non-stop, okay, and you create a lot of memes, because most people are not going to read anything serious. They are not going to sit down and listen to an hour-long lecture. So create memes, okay, and share it on social media that make fun of Jesus, so that the teenagers among Christians who are growing up will come into contact with these things, and then they will not be able to resist the temptation to find out what these things mean. That's how you can become Christianity. Next question.
Harish Bharadwaj.
Hello.
Yes.
I'm audible?
Yes, you are.
Not really. Can you speak a bit louder?
Yes. Good morning and good evening to everyone because here it is evening and USA it's morning. So actually, my question is, it is our experience. I'm living in Delhi, Faridabad, India. So I have observed that many of our the caste, like scheduled caste, they have not much faith in Hindu religion. Maybe because of some politicians, they want to divide the Hindus. And in some areas in the past, in Maharashtra, it was happened that these people have, thrown the portraits of Lord
And
Shiva,
if I may interject, sorry to interject, Harish ji.
feet with shoes, all these things. So, sorry, moment. So my question is, how to bring them for, giving a more, more
So this
faith in our religion.
I understood the question. Sorry to interject. It's a great question, but since we are diverging away from the topic time and again, let's park this question. I'll take it up in one of the future calls. How to do garvapsi of different jatis. It has to be a jati-based strategy, but it is not at all true that the so-called scheduled caste or alienated from dharma. Okay, so that is not true, but we will take up that question separately in another call. Next question, but I request those who have pertinent questions that are pertinent to today's topic to ask the next question.
Yeah. Thank you. And just keep in mind that we'll be finishing up shortly. So Shobha Swamiji is next. Shobhaji?
Mine also probably pertains to future talks in terms of how we can take in all the information that you're giving us over these 4 talks, and how do we make it ours in terms of disseminating this to our larger Hindu population or a larger general population. So we need some pointers, Kalai.
Yeah. So very simple. I think it's one of storytelling, right? And then look at the Ramayana or the Mahabharata. Okay, how did we tell those stories, right? Vyasa or Valmiki created a version, right? And then the rest of our ancestors, they adapted these to the time, place, and circumstances. A good example is Kamba Ramayanam in Tamil, right? So Valmiki wrote the Ramayana, and then Kambar did not just translate it. He rendered that in Tamil, and then in doing so, he factored in the local cultural sensibilities, the ethos, and everything, and then he told the story, and that became as good a classic as the Valmiki Ramayana. Okay, and some would even argue that it has even greater poetic merit than the Valmiki Ramayana. So that's exactly what we need to do. So what I'm providing you is a lot of ammunition. Okay, and today you have a lot of channels. For example, you have your own WhatsApp group. The easiest one could do is to say, if everyone agrees that Christianity must be eradicated, then the simplest thing one could do is take these things and simplify them in a language that you can propagate within your own groups. It can be a WhatsApp group. Okay, it can be your own Facebook friends and others, and you can propagate this so that more and more people come to learn the truth about Christianity and Islam. So that would be my advice.
Yeah, next is Sri Krishna ji. Please unmute yourself. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Hi, here. Venkat, I have a very question which is related and also a little deviant from that. The purpose of conversion or spreading Christianity is okay. Now, what happens when everything is converted? Because there is no single organization which is doing all these things. There are n number of organizations, they are doing it. What is the purpose? Where will it end, or what do they want in the day?
Yeah. So first of all, the purpose of conversion is not okay. Okay, and this is exactly why people should read the Bible critical. Okay, for example, it is not okay to convert someone to the ideology of ISIS or Al Qaeda or Taliban. It's exactly for the same reason. It is not okay to convert someone to Christianity, because I'm not opposed to conversion in general. I support Garvapsi. It's okay to convert someone to Hinduism. It's okay to convert someone to Buddhism, Jainism, or a lot of, Confucianism and all these religions. And it's okay to convert somebody to various pagan religions or Native American religions like, ayahuasca and all these things. Okay. I support all of those things. So I'm not opposed to conversion. However, it is not okay to convert someone to Christianity or Islam because both of these are evil. The yardstick you should use is if a religion is beneficial and if its teachings are noble, then it is okay to convert someone to that religion. And if a religion is harmful and if its teachings are evil, then it is not okay to convert. So the core is Christianity is an evil religion. Jesus, if at all he ever lived, was a completely unedifying character. And regardless, the Jesus of the New Testament is an unedifying character. You would not want him as your neighbor because he will torture your children, he will kill them, and then he will torture them in hell for eternity. He is that kind of a guy. So you would not, in today's world, you would not want Jesus as your neighbor, so you should not have him as your savior or Messiah either. So the bottom line is, the purpose of conversion of Christianity is exactly what we should challenge. And we cannot start with saying, okay, we agree with your purpose, and maybe all religions lead to the same destination, but then you have too many churches. Those are all peripheral. Okay, what if they had a single church? And then if they wanted to convert everyone to Christianity, would it be acceptable? No, because it's still the same Bible, it's still the same Jesus. So it's the fountainhead that we should attack, because the fountainhead is the one that is spreading poison. The problem is not with the missionaries. The problem is not that there are too many sects of Christianity. And of course, having many sects bestows a certain degree of adaptive fitness on Christianity because they compete with each other and they remain battle fit. That's a different story. But apart from that, and probably if we had only a single version of Christianity, then it would have been a little weaker than having so many different sects. Or if you only had Catholicism, which is not as decentralized as the various Protestant and evangelical denominations are, then Christianity would be a little less weaker than it is today. But that's a secondary point. The primary point we should focus on is the purpose of spreading Christianity. That itself is what we should challenge. That itself is what we should not accept. Next question.
Yes, second last question from Venugopalji.
Good morning or good afternoon. I have a very quick question. It's about the one of the topics is that the Christianity was created by the Romans. It was not, there was no real Jesus or anybody, just to control the poor and also to make the to have a competing religion against the Judaism. The Romans at that time, who were kind of faltering in their rule of law and their control over the masses, they created the Christianity. I just wanted to hear your opinion on that.
Right. So that is the thesis of the book Caesar's Messiah. I'll make a separate session on that. I'll conduct a separate session. I'll do that, but in a gist. Okay. So I do not entirely agree with that. Okay. So simply put, at the core, Christianity is an apocalyptic religion. Okay. As was all of the Judaism that existed from the 1st century BCE until around 130, 140 CE. Okay. Until the Second Revolt. So what does it mean? What is a messianic and what is apocalyptic mean? What does that mean? It means, starting from the book of Daniel, Jews expected the end of the world to happen very soon. Okay, the belief was that a Jewish Messiah will come and then he will overthrow the kings on earth, that primarily the Roman Empire, because the Romans were subjugating and colonizing the Jewish people. Okay, so they were eagerly anticipating the arrival of this Messiah. So, and then when the Messiah arrives, there will be an apocalypse, and then there will be a widespread destruction. All these things will happen. Okay, so this is at the core the belief of both Judaism that existed around 2000 years ago and Christianity, which was then just newly born. So here what happens, in this religion, if at all you thought that the Romans would have come up with a very clever tactic to create a new religion to distract everyone. Okay, what you would expect to see is Romans indulging in a lot of these things in the 1st century CE. Okay, you don't find that. There is zero evidence for any of these things. And then instead, this is my take on what happened. So Christianity started as a Jewish sect. I do not know whether it's really started in the diaspora. I am sorry, in the diaspora or in Palestine proper. Okay, I am tempted to think it started in the diaspora and not so much in Palestine proper. Okay, but again, that's only a possibility. Okay, that's only one of the many options. Regardless, it starts in the diaspora, in my opinion, in areas in and around Syria, Alexandria, and other places. Then it starts spreading in the eastern part of the Roman Empire before it goes to the western part of the Roman Empire. And then when it goes, that's when that's the trajectory you see. It starts with defining Judaism, defining Christianity as a Jewish religion, but slowly they start, rejecting a lot of the Jewish practices, including the need for circumcision, the dietary laws, a lot of other things, right? And then slowly they distance the Old Testament teachings or the Jewish teachings, and then they start introducing a lot of anti-Semitic verses. There are, Norman Beck has shown that there are more than 450 anti-Semitic verses in the New Testament. So all of these things come into the Bible subsequently. So the way I am seeing it is, it started off as a Jewish sect within the diaspora, but then it started spreading into the non-Jewish people, among the non-Jewish people, the pagans. And then by the time of the 2nd, 3rd century CE, there were a sizable body of Christians, okay, especially the eastern part of the empire. And that's why when Constantine becomes the emperor, he shifts the capital to the eastern part, because that's where his support base was. Okay, so I don't entirely agree with Atkins' theory of Caesar's Messiah, but I will talk about that in one of the forthcoming sessions. Next question.
Yes, so the last question, we're out of time. So I think Shashi Kantji had asked a question. Okay. Please go ahead, Shashi.
My question was mainly about the reaction of Hindus that are watching this. Some of us have been through this information in direct or indirect ways, so we believe you. A lot of people, including Vandanaji, that got out of the group belligerently, there are various reactions, and I would like you to explain the psychology behind these reactions. The mild one will be, well, this needs to be verified by a Christian or ex-Christian. The extreme will be, belligerent like Vandanaji that left. Can you explain the psychology behind why Hindus act like that? And I remember Babu Sushilanji in our old conferences explained that very well, and I misplaced what he had said. Can you explain why Hindus act so differently and so belligerently?
Yeah. Absolutely. It's not just Hindus, right? Most people would show a degree of incredulity, right, when we speak these truths about Christianity. And what is the reason? I think the reason goes back to evolutionary biology, right? We tend to conform to what is mainstream thinking. That's part of our human nature. Because, when we were in the Neolithic age, when we were cavemen, we were very vulnerable to the wild beasts. A tiger, a lion, any one of them could have easily attacked and killed us, or a snake. So most of the time, your survival chances increased when you listen to somebody, okay, and when you conformed to overall behavior accepted by the community. If somebody said, look, don't step out in the dark because you can be attacked by a big cat, okay, and then people followed that and did not challenge that, they survived. Those who challenged, maybe they got eaten away. And then so the tendency to conform is inherent to all human beings, okay, or to most of the human beings. That's number one. And since the mainstream narrative has been that Jesus was a great man, he was a reformer, he was an embodiment of love, Christianity is the religion of love. Since all these things have been fed to us over the last 2 centuries, most people just conform to these propagandist stances. That's number one. Then the second one is, it's very easy to take the path of least resistance. Okay, so for example, if you went and told the Christians or even other Hindus that, hey, you know what, there are problems in Hinduism too, that's why Christianity is spreading. Or if you went and told them, we have nothing against Christianity or Jesus, but we only oppose conversion. most people will nod their head. So this is a path of least resistance that a lot of people try to take. And third, there is also dhimmitude among Hindus in particular, because we have been colonized first by the Muslims, then by Christians for more than 2 centuries, by the Christians alone. And then for a lot of these people, being submissive has become second nature. Okay, and hence they immediately turn belligerent against fellow Hindus who speak the truth. Okay, and if you spoke the truth, then they will these Hindus start reacting as first responders. They will attack you for being intolerant or not being Hindu-like, and for smearing the name and character of Jesus and all these things, and then they will turn belligerent. In fact, that's what I have often seen when I criticize Jesus or the Bible. The first ones to respond, Christians will be very uncomfortable, right? But then they also know that I'm speaking the truth. Okay, they have never been able to challenge me. But Hindus in the audience will be the first to get agitated, and then they will react. That's because of dhimmitude. Okay, most of them are very submissive people, and hence that submissiveness turns into passive aggression towards fellow Hindus who speak the truth. And then they tend, by doing that, they are appealing to other Christians to accept them as the good Hindus. Okay, we are the good Hindus. Don't listen to the likes of Kalavi Venkat and others he follows. He follows Cohen Radels and Sitaram Goyal and others. So don't listen to those people. Those are the bad Hindus. They are very offensive. And we are the good Hindus. We won't say anything negative about Jesus. Okay, so this is partly driven by dhimmitude, a very submissive and cowardly nature, which a lot of Hindus demonstrate. Okay, that's one. And last one is complete intellectual laziness. Okay, I have walked into the homes of so many Hindus. Okay, and I have found, I don't know, what is it, 50 inches television? Is it 80 inches television or 8,000 inches television? I don't know what it is. Okay, there will be those massive plasma TVs from wall to wall of their living rooms. Okay, they will have expensive cars. Okay, expensive homes. Okay, they will have all these things. But where is the bookshelf? Okay, where is your personal library? I don't find that. Okay, most of the Hindus don't have it. If at all there is anything they read, it is the next version of the software they are working on. Okay, that they need it for their livelihood, so they read it. So for the most part, the intellectual quest among Hindus has significantly declined. Okay, over the last 100 years or so. And I still remember, like some of my relatives from the previous generation, they may have worked only as clerks in a government department, but then they could sit down and they can discuss about Vedanta, philosophy, and all these things for hours. And today, that's not the case. Okay, so there is a significant intellectual decline coupled with intellectual laziness among a lot of Hindus, and that means they are not going to explore the truth, and they are rather very comfortable repeating the propaganda and gaining some favors from our enemies. Okay, so I treat these first responders as no different from our enemies. Okay, these are no different from Christians. So I am merciless in ridiculing and mocking them and calling them cowards. Okay, which is what they are. And I'm not in for a popularity contest here, and I am not trying to be Mr. Congeniality. And I am here to just speak the truth. Take it for what it is worth.
Thank you very much. Another fantastic session. We'll be back. And with that, namaskars to everybody and have a nice one.
Thank you and namaste.
Thank you.